Episode 1.
All right, and we have Billy Collins,
Yes. The
one of
great Billy Collins.
one of the most famous poets of the back half of the 20th century and into the 21st century.
Maybe probably our most, I mean, for the poets that we've done, I think he's probably the most like current famous, right? He's got to
Right.
be maybe the most famous poet right now. I mean,
Hmm.
Mary Oliver, she passed away a couple of years ago. I, she'd be kind of up there with him, I think. But he's
Hmm.
probably the most widely recognized that we've done so far. That's currently, contemporary.
Right. Billy Collins, he's at the intersection of popularity,
Hmm.
accolades, and contemporaneousness. So,
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, he's someone who and there's many reasons why this is the case. And I know that he just reminds me of Robert Frost. Just
mm-hmm.
in terms of his popularity, even his, just kind of
His
focusing
accolades.
accolades and, being kind of a late bloomer in some regards as far as publishing.
Mm,
Like he kind of, his first books were, in his 40s, similar to Frost, so a little bit older of a poet, publishing wise. I know he was writing before that for a long time and, but he also just like his focus on like the everyday.
right, right. That also stuck out to me. And that's why I was considering to be sort of a postmodern poet, not necessarily in a critique, but
Hmm.
just in his the way that he can exalt the ordinary things
Hmm.
and sort of also bring like high minded things down to earth.
Yeah.
But it's interesting him being in the back half of the 20th century, because ordinary to him is like, as opposed to some poets, their ordinary to them was like, people going to work every day, working in
Hmm.
factories,
Hmm.
writing letters.
Hmm.
But Billy Collins, the ordinary thing to him is like television, movies. He'll make allusions to, things like that, like pop culture.
Hmm.
Um, he even did some performances with Bill Murray, like
I didn't
some
know that.
yeah,
I
yeah,
didn't see
he's
that.
he's done some pop culture things with
Hmm.
several people. Bill Murray, Amy
Mm.
Mann is a musician
Hmm.
that I
Okay.
actually hadn't heard of. I
Okay.
actually listened to a
I'm not.
couple of her
Oh,
songs
really? Okay.
in preparation for this. She's kind of
Mm.
like a Nora Jones or a
Okay.
like a Fiona Apple, but
Mm-hmm.
she's been doing it since like the 80s, and they
Okay.
do like a
Okay.
poetry music kind of
Hmm.
back and forth
Interesting.
thing.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like Amy Man is for any man. Sounds like she's
Hey, hey, look, she's got a ferocious fan base. Like
Oh,
I
okay.
personally didn't know about her, but
Okay. That's
she,
interesting. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I'd be a
hey,
bit curious. Yeah.
yeah, she
To
her
hear that.
songs are, she's definitely like obviously like Fiona Apple, Nora Jones. They're in the
Mm-hmm.
late '90s, early
Mm-hmm.
2000s, but Amy
Yeah.
Mann, she's kind of like that, but coming from the '80s.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No. You know, Billy Collins, talking about his popularity, he's two-term poet laureate,
Mm,
won several awards for his books. He also, there's like a kind of a funny tidbit where I don't know if he was the first, he might have been the first, where he got like a six-figure advance, as a poet, when
mm,
changing publishers. I think when he went to Random House, which
okay. Yeah. Yeah.
I believe he's done like 8 books with Random House to this point, but and he's done like 11 or 12 collections of poetry that he's published over the years. So like kind of mentioning earlier, he didn't start publishing books until a little bit later in his 40s. But he's been pretty prolific since. Of course that was 40 years ago. He's in his 80s now, because I believe he was in 41 was when he was born. So um but also to make a point about, when you're talking about him, what his everyday is, and we might see that's kind of almost like a relic of a certain time, like that kind of
Mm,
baby boomer. There's a lot of them that are just like I don't know what they do all day. They're
yeah.
not working. They're not really doing anything. They're just kind of hanging out.
Right.
And I don't know if we're going to see that. It might be some time before we see that again in in the future in American culture. If ever, who knows? How many leisure classes did Rome have?
Mm. Yeah, he's definitely gives that like back half of the 20th century. You know, kind of like he got his writing often reminds me of the book White Noise by Don
Mm,
DeLillo.
yep.
Sort of it's very aware of itself. You know, his
Yes.
very he almost knows that people are gonna read it, and the people that read it, they almost have a certain amount of knowledge about, whether it's, and I don't want, when I say pop culture, I don't necessarily mean like, necessarily like pop artists, but just like what is popular or prominent in the culture,
Hmm.
especially in sort of like the academic class. He's Billy, you mentioned leisure class. He's definitely one of these cable TV boomers, I guess. That I like, maybe like kind of like the SNL,
Hmm.
70s
Right.
going into the
Hmm.
80s. This is, we all have like, uncles or maybe even our parents
Yes.
that fit this sort of category.
Hmm. Right. Right. Yeah. In his writing, I think you might have used the word meta earlier. Did you? Um,
I think so.
mhm. And because he also often writes about writing,
Mm,
um, which I've
right.
read several. I even listened to a podcast, an interview, in preparation for this, where he's talking about his latest book, Water, Water, released in 2024. That the poem that he read from that, it's escaping. The title's escaping me, but it was about writing again. Like
Mm,
that's just
right.
through all of his books. I have his sailing around the room alone, or sailing alone around the room, which is a collected, like kind of selected book. And through each book, all of his books, he's writing about writing. Like it's always
Mm,
kind of present. Um, so yeah, that might also be a little bit of a sign of like a leisure class, because that is his um, more his everyday rather than maybe work, you know.
right, right. And that goes into, and I think the word I used was postmodern. Like it kind of goes into
Hmm.
the postmodern. There's a, you have to be able to have a lot of time on your hands to kind of think and reflect and be so self-reflexive.
Hmm.
But the thing about Billy Collins is he's not necessarily like super critical.
Hmm.
He's not always like criticizing something
No.
or finding ways in which grand narratives have fallen short. Which that if you want some more of that, obviously, Don DeLillo may be a bit more up your alley. That's a novelist, not a poet. But as far as his poetry is concerned, it's just postmodern, and it's awareness that it's being read. It's awareness that it's a poem, and the way that we can take sort of mundane things and exalt them, and sort of take high-minded things and bring them down to earth. And there's going to be elements of that in both the poems that we chose today.
Yeah. Yeah, and I want to say too with that is that I've heard him talk about keeping the reader in mind, which
Mm,
I think you're kind of touching on. And also something I found interesting is that he thinks of his as he has a writing persona, and his persona
mm,
is like very optimistic and looking to be surprised and looking to be delighted in the world.
mm, okay.
um, where in the one interview I listened to, he mentioned that his persona drinks tea because he's very sensitive.
Mm.
However, Billy Collins mostly drinks coffee. So just to get
That's interesting.
right,
You
yeah.
know, that's
So
that
yeah.
that kind of reminds me, just talking about postmodernism, contemporary art kind of just reminds me of like a hip hop or like a hip hop a
Mm-hmm.
rapper maybe would
Yeah,
say some
right.
things like that,
Mm-hmm.
like
Right, right.
have a persona, so to
Hmm.
speak.
Hmm. Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Hey, HOVA. Homie, it's Hova. That's
And that it just, and it also kind of makes me think that like about, we he had this bidding war, and
Mhm,
like he's, you might even think about like a rapper having like labels bidding for him,
Right.
or and
Yeah.
then maybe like even a rapper like making like pop culture references and things like
Right.
that.
Right.
So
Yeah. And he's not the first that we've had that has been like that. Remember Terrence Hayes?
I do.
Very.
Terrence,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yep.
but Terrence Hayes is much younger.
Yes. Yeah. But yeah, would have come up. Well, Terrence Hayes, I think his first book was in the '90s, late '90s, so he would
Mm,
have been, a young man trying to make it in the publishing world, probably seeing that, Billy Collins just got a six-figure
right. Yeah.
advance and thinking like, hey, that could be me.
Right. Right. And that,
Who knows? But
but no, I do see some similarities between their writing.
yeah, perfect. Well, hey, I mean, you want to get into it? You want to get into
All
the
right.
poems
Yeah.
here?
We can go ahead and get into the poems. I can go first because
Okay,
my poem's called Introduction to Poetry.
sounds fair.
Yeah, and this is definitely one of those meta poems. It's definitely one of those poems about poetry, and we will um get more into it. Let me share my screen. Sharing my screen now, and can everyone see that? All right.
I can.
All right. So, Introduction to Poetry by Billy Collins. I asked them to take a poem and hold it up to the light like a color slide, or press an ear against its hive. I say drop a mouse into a poem and watch him probe his way out, or walk inside the poem's room and feel the walls for a light switch. I want them to water ski across the surface of a poem, waving at the author's name on the shore. But all they want to do is tie the poem to a chair with rope and torture a confession out of it. They begin beating it with a hose to find out what it really means. Introduction to Poetry by Billy Collins. So this is a poem that's not only it's aware that it is a poem. This is a poet that is a educator, is a teacher, and the poem's called Introduction to Poetry. So he's analyzing how his students are engaging with poetry through a poem. So
Mm,
we're back. So again, the word meta sort of comes to mind.
yeah. Yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't use this to teach in his class. You know,
You say
like
he doesn't?
yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if he does use it.
Oh yeah, yeah. I wouldn't be either.
Yeah, yeah. But I enjoy this one. I like how what he is describing, he is showing. Like
Right.
he and that's kind of goes to that sort of postmodern sort of meta commentary, like asking them to, take a poem and hold it up to a light like a color slide, like really,
Really
analyze these
look at
things.
it, analyze.
Right.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Yeah, look, take look at them a little different, press an ear against its hive, like this poem is buzzing, it's alive, it's
Mm-hmm.
you know, um yeah, drop a mouse into a poem, watch him probe his way out. I love, just the
Right.
imagery is just fantastic.
The
Um,
and the imagery is sort of especially the mouse and the hive. It
mhm,
almost seems a
mhm,
bit biological, or
mhm. Yep.
like biology class, like things that these students
Mhm.
may do in a biology class.
Right.
Like
Yeah,
they
and
may
others.
like,
Right. Yep.
yeah, like bringing in other disciplines, making
Mhm.
allusions to things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, and like science, kind of being
Hmm.
like using scientific experiments, which um reading Ezra Pound, which this kind of reminds me of Pound a little bit. It's got some, we're talking about postmodern. Has some sort of imagist sort of
Lot like lines, little stanzas in
yeah,
there.
yeah, elements. And Pound talks a lot about, um kind of treating poetry like science. And so, he's like, hey, drop a
Mm,
mouse into it, experiment with it.
right, right. And and then but also like I want them to water ski, almost like I want them to sort of feel
Mm-hmm.
like the exhilaration of it, like
Mm-hmm.
waving at the author's name on the shore. To me, this is a commentary on, an idea known as the death of the author.
Mm,
Like, you know,
mm,
in our time, we often want to, you know, hold people accountable, like
mm,
almost like take, you know, people's work in light of who they are and
mm,
sort of their ideas that they, you know, purvey. But as far as Billy Collins, he's almost like wave at the author's name on the shore, leave the author's name
mm,
behind,
mm,
don't worry
mhm.
so much
Yeah.
about who wrote the poem.
Right, right,
um
right.
just sort of, you know, just sort of exhilarate on the surface like a water ski,
Mm,
like a
mm.
jet ski across the surface of you know, the ocean.
Right, yeah, yeah. Well, and it's like it also sort of is, before that he's saying, walk inside the poem's room and feel the walls for a light switch, like,
Mm,
go in blind, go in blind and find, what you're looking for,
right,
and
right.
then also sort of uh, then I don't I want to say like opposite of that sort of is like also feel free to just stay on the surface, just skim
Mm,
across it,
okay, okay.
do both,
Right, right. um you know, then it's almost, and this is not a sonnet, but the last two stanzas almost represent a turn. You know, we almost
Yep,
have
absolutely.
a bit of a turn for the last two lines. You know, he says, but the students, all they want to do is tie the poem to a chair with the rope and torture a confession out of it. To me, this is a critique of, like, you know, the confessionalist poetry that's very popular today, has been popular for maybe the last 15 years, 2 decades, something like that. But it's been around for a while, you know. People, there's a vein of poets that seem to just want to get something off their chest. They want their poetry to almost be be a representation, a one-to-one representation of their emotions, almost like without necessarily almost like they don't even enjoy it, or almost like they don't even look look uh into it for what it is. They almost want a confession of that they can find sort of acceptable, you know.
Mhm,
That's why I think he means when they say they begin to beat it with a hose to
mm,
find out what
mm,
it really means, you know.
yeah,
Not all you know, poetry, it's okay to sort of, you know, going back to that illusion of feeling the walls for a light switch, it's
mhm,
okay to go into poetry not knowing completely everything.
mhm,
You know, maybe you have to read it 3 times, 4 times to get it this way, or
mhm,
to understand this meaning or that meaning. And you know, there is a vein of young poet that I can, you know, I can see beating, that wants to beat a confession out of every poet, and out of every poem they read.
mhm. Yeah. Yeah, well, and I think it goes to some conversations you and I have had, sort of, separately outside of this about how, and there you see this in many forms of art. It's across. This is sort of a cultural issue, I think, not just poetry. Obviously, Billy Collins is a poet. He interacts with young people through poetry and through teaching poetry. So that's where I think you know, that's where the rubber meets the road. But it could even point to a larger, sort of cultural issue where we want things kind of spoon fed to us, just tell me what
Mm,
it's about. What is this about? What am I supposed to take from this? Okay, this is a poem about flowers. And or this is a poem about, the beauty and youth, and like
mm,
so that's what I take from it. We kind of want we don't want nuance. We don't want to be kind of confused or shocked or we're kind of weary of surprise,
mm.
because what are you,
Right, right.
what's your angle, almost. And we want kind of just clear cut black and white. And the same with, going back to the author, leave the author's name on the shore. Be like, well, Ezra Pound, he was, a communist. I don't know if I should, he was a
Right.
fascist, so I shouldn't read his poetry, and
Exactly.
uh, yada, on down the line. But so that's what I kind of read into those last few lines. Just kind of speaking about a larger. It's an introduction to poetry. Maybe it's an introduction to the I don't know, the state of mind of people. Maybe that and poetry is a reflection.
And and I'm glad you brought up Pound, because I was about to make the same allusion that you just made. Yeah, but it's an introduction to poetry. It's how a teacher, someone who's done it, who's been around it, how he wants his students to engage with poetry. It's much more like, you are not. He is a teacher talking to students, so he's saying, like, you are not an authority figure. You
Hmm.
are not able to sort of torture confessions out of
Hmm.
poets.
Hmm. Hmm.
Leave the author's name on the shore. Don't,
Right.
a lot of times we'll take the author's name, and Pound is the perfect
Hmm.
example. A
Hmm.
great poet, but because of his, we're all sort of tossed to and fro politically in a way.
Hmm.
We
Hmm.
imagine ourselves as being able to sort of stand against these great forces that come about in our lives. But if we were being honest with ourselves, we'd realize that we are tossed and turned, we are tossed to and fro politically. But
Hmm.
there are people there, the do-gooder crowd. They want to put you in a chair. They want to tie you in a chair and say, "Give me a confession. What is this poem
Right.
about? What does
Yeah.
this poem mean?"
Yeah. Right.
And it's almost like, hey, leave that on the shore. Let
Right.
us let
Hmm.
us almost, to borrow a phrase, let us luxuriate in the texts. You know,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Yeah.
but not only have fun, but let's have this sort of the detachment of a photographer, the detachment of a biologist. Let's
Yeah.
just drop a rat in the
Hmm.
poem and see
Hmm.
what it does, what it pulls
Hmm.
off.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I think that for me, the crux of the poem, or I don't know if it's the crux. What I really, because that's not true. It's not the crux. The that sentence two. I say, drop a mouse into a poem and watch him probe his way out, or walk inside the poem's room and feel the walls for a light switch. That's the kind of, I too want to say to the public, the reading public, like, hey, just go and figure it out, experiment, don't, go
Right,
in blind, just search it out,
right.
I kind of, that's kind of my favorite part of the poem,
Mm-hmm.
those lines stick out to me the most.
No,
Yeah.
my favorite part of the poem is in a weird way, it's the turn, because he kind of
Hmm.
just
Yeah.
he kind of sounds defeated.
Mm. Mm.
And
Yeah, yeah, maybe a little, yeah.
it's almost like, this is all they want to do.
Hmm.
I invite them to be more exploratory. I invite them to be
Hmm.
more fun, but
Hmm.
they almost seem to they wanted to stand on one side or the other. And I think
Hmm.
that is, as you've mentioned, that is a bigger symptom in our culture.
Yeah, yeah. It reminds me too of MF Doom in on the Mad Villain album. Um oh, I want to say it's on it's the track after Great Day. And he
Oh, is it
says
a
he's
Rhinestone Cowboy?
yeah, I think he says something along the lines of how he's gonna tie the game up to a chair and,
Oh,
sort of take, to torture the game, or
right. Being shocked with a pole or something like
Mhm,
that.
mhm.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. And I kind of picture that same sort of imagery of, that's what it evokes, to
Right,
me.
right.
But that's the crux. The turn it that's the crux of the poem.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what it hangs
It's
on.
the educator's wishes, and sort of his he's inviting them. I ask them,
Mm,
I
mhm,
say,
right, yeah,
I
yeah,
want them,
mhm, mhm, yeah, he
I implore
suggests,
them. Yeah,
right,
right, right.
yeah, yep, yeah,
And
poking and prodding.
in when you're young, and especially a young poet, you can really claim to have a lot of knowledge. You can go,
Absolutely.
I
Young
know,
yes.
I know so much, but
Mhm, mhm,
you
right.
know,
Right, we are ready to judge and to
right.
determine who is good and bad, uh,
Right.
for better
And
or
he
worse.
and even though like I think when I was younger and when we were a bit younger, maybe we wouldn't have done that with poetry or music, but I'm sure we were doing that in our own way.
I
You
think we
know,
were. Yeah, I know I
right.
was. I still do.
Even though nowadays it's much more, you hear much more critiques of
Mhm,
media,
mhm,
poetry,
mhm.
the elements of pop culture than I
Right.
think when we were a bit younger. But I
Mm,
think it's coming from the same place, a sort of
mm, mhm,
messiah complex. Hey, we know
mhm,
what's right.
mhm.
We're on the quote unquote right side of history.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So
Exactly. Well, hey, you have any final
any final thoughts? Hey, it's a good
yeah,
introduction. This is an introduction to poetry.
I think it's yeah.
Experiment with it. Don't
Mhm.
experiment with the poem. Don't
Mhm.
always try to be so definitive.
Mhm.
Feel
Mhm.
around for a bit before
Mhm.
you find the
Mhm.
light switch.
Yeah.
And then, enjoy yourself on the surface of the poem,
Yep.
you know, as opposed to dragging the author everywhere with
Mm,
you.
mhm.
Allow yourself to
Yeah,
be
yeah.
pulled by the
Mhm.
poem.
Mhm. Mhm. Yep.
And poetry is not it's not math. You can't, with math, it's almost like we have these rules, the rule
Mm.
of tautology. We do the same
Yeah.
thing on both sides,
Yeah.
and then
Mm.
you have all these hard and fast rules with math. We use these formulas to almost beat answers out of equations.
Mhm.
Poetry is not math. We're not going to beat answers out of equations.
Mhm.
We're not able to sort of impose our will on the poem. We have to allow the poem to carry us somewhere.
Yeah. 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 No, I think it's a great poem, and it's apt because I think if I were to show someone an introduction to maybe even Billy Collins or poetry itself, I don't think it's a bad place to start.
No, not at all. And well, I try to remember where that poem came from. I think it was in his 1988 work. I think so.
I want to say that
It's,
one. What was the name of that? Because I think that might
let me
be
see.
also the same one that I pulled my book from. Yes, it is.
Okay.
Um, and what book is that? Because that is a good one. Here, it's Oh, you know what? It's not the same one, but it is from 1988. Mine I got from Questions About Angels.
Okay, yeah,
Uh,
this one's from The Apple That Astonished Paris.
yeah, yeah. There we go.
Yeah, which
Which is his first book, and so he
okay.
was if he was 88
Wow.
and he was born in 41, I think he was 47. Is
Okay.
that if I'm right? Which is why
And
I
that
think it's such a mature voice.
right, and that was from his first book, so he was already teaching. So
Mhm.
the poem Introduction to Poetry came from Collins' introduction to poetry.
Mm, mm. Yeah,
So
he
that's
is
another
a
meta
yeah.
layer.
Mhm. One difference between him and Frost is that he's a bit more of an institutional, like he's an academic, right?
Hmm.
He's got a PhD. He's been teaching. Frost wasn't as entrenched in institutions.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
But hey, you want to move on to mine here? I realized afterwards you got your poem from the Poetry Foundation. I realized after I typed mine up and sent it to you that it too is on the Poetry Foundation. So
Hmm.
um, either one will do. But I'm going to read from the book here as James pulls this up. Oh,
Let me see, making sure everyone can see. Yeah.
yeah,
And I
perfect.
will scroll along as you read.
Awesome. All right. So, the death of allegory. I am wondering what became of all those tall abstractions that used to pose, robed and statuesque, in paintings and parade about on the pages of the Renaissance displaying their capital letters like license plates. Truth cantering on a powerful horse, chastity, eyes downcast, fluttering with veils. Each one was marble come to life, a thought in a coat, courtesy bowing with one hand always extended, villainy sharpening an instrument behind a wall, reason with her crown, and constancy alert behind a helm. They are all retired now, consigned to a Florida for tropes. Justice is there, standing by an open refrigerator. Valor lies in bed listening to the rain. Even death has nothing to do but mend his cloak and hood, and all their props are locked away in a warehouse. Hourglasses, globes, blindfolds, and shackles. Even if you called them back, there are no places left for them to go. No garden of mirth or bower of bliss. The valley of forgiveness is lined with condominiums, and chainsaws are howling in the forest of despair. Here on the table near the window is a vase of peonies, and next to it black binoculars and a money clip. Exactly the kind of thing we now prefer. Objects that sit quietly on a line in lowercase, themselves and nothing more. A wheelbarrow, an empty mailbox, a razor blade resting in a glass ashtray. As for the others, the great ideas on horseback and the long-haired virtues in embroidered gowns, it looks as though they have traveled down that road you see on the final page of storybooks, the one that winds up a green hillside and disappears into an unseen valley where everyone must be fast asleep. So, a little bit longer than yours, but I think in some regards similar in the fact that this is kind of a meta poem, or at least, it is self aware of poetry and literature and sort of the place that we are currently at with literature. And we talked about Pound earlier, and not to jump too far ahead, but one thing that Pound said in his essay, like I forget what it is, but it's like don'ts for 13 don'ts for an imagist. Go in fear of abstractions, and through modernism and subsequently postmodernism, we've left abstractions behind. You know,
Mm.
and I think that's really what this poem is talking about, is the death of allegory, the death of these sort of high ideals, high morals. It's not what's in favor anymore. It's not what we're looking for. What we want are, images, these objects, all in a line and lowercase, um, because what would Pound would say that the natural object is the correct symbol, right? It's the perfect symbol, instead of having these symbols, like valor, that if anyone's read like a Pilgrim's Progress, or like a book like that, one of these older kind of almost like medieval works that would sort of embody ideals. We've left that behind. Um, so what do you think?
Right. We definitely have left those ideals behind. What this kind of reminds me of is sort of like a in mythology, oftentimes there'll be like a myth of it'll be almost like a culling of lesser gods.
Mm,
Like lesser gods will maybe be destroyed in a
yeah.
war or
Mm-hmm.
some sort
Mm-hmm.
of cataclysm, and some of the lesser gods that have that and this is just my my term that
Yeah.
I'm applying to this, but things like chastity,
Mm-hmm.
courtesy, these things that he's capitalized: villainy,
Mm-hmm.
const- constancy,
Mm-hmm.
reason.
Mm-hmm.
um these are almost like lesser gods that did a
Mm-hmm.
lot to sort of inform our culture,
Right.
parade about on the pages of the Renaissance,
Mm-hmm.
displaying their capital letters like license plates. And that's
Mm-hmm.
that's
Mm-hmm.
what Collins does. He always has that. He'll take
Right.
something from back in the day, this
Mm-hmm.
that postmodern, something from back in the day, and apply it to license plates.
Mm-hmm.
Are
Right.
these these lesser gods that were the things like Columbia, and
Mm-hmm.
Columbia was a it was this female that had like a this female allegory, really, of America, that had like a helmet and a sword.
Mm-hmm.
We often don't see Columbia portrayed much anymore. Around
Right.
the world wars, she was kind of done away with in favor of Uncle Sam. But
Mm-hmm.
this is what Collins is talking about: all these sort of allegories of that were personified
Mm-hmm.
on on whether it's on horseback or with robes, and they would pose in paintings.
Mm-hmm.
These and these allegories have been consigned to a Florida for
Hmm.
tropes.
Right,
They've been
right. Yep.
consigned to like this place where
Hmm.
not only members of his generation go to die,
Right.
like the baby boomers, but
Hmm.
there's almost this place where these allegories go to
Hmm.
die. And
Hmm.
it's interesting that an allegory like Columbia was done away with around the world wars, because around the world wars is where we were had this sort of these, we had a lot of high-minded ideas during the world wars,
Right.
where after the world wars we have modernism giving way to postmodernism. So postmodernism is the critique of these grand narratives, and Billy Collins almost frames that critique as the grand narratives have grown old and
Hmm.
they have
Hmm.
been consigned to
Right.
retirement communities.
Right. Yeah.
So
Hmm.
it's
Which,
a fantastic poem.
yeah, which is, Florida, obviously, that's a proper noun, right? So that's
Hmm.
why it's capitalized. But in a way, even Florida here is sort of an allegory or a trope,
Hmm.
because they,
Right.
they go to a Florida for tropes, like, and that Florida is representative of everything that you just said. That is now, that's like a modern allegory, you know.
Hmm.
Because, of course, who knows where they went to? Maybe they went down to South Carolina. They didn't quite make it all the way to
Yeah.
Florida. They're budget friendly, but
I was just about to say Florida on a budget.
yeah, but one of my what I also enjoy about this poem is that each of these like Valor lies in bed listening to the rain. Each of these like allegories is doing the opposite of what it used to do
Mm,
when you look at it. So, Valor, lying in bed listening to rain sounds like, I don't know, is Valor depressed? you
right.
know right,
Okay.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
where's its, Valor should
Mm,
be, not lying in bed, at the very
right.
least. um Justice is there standing by an open refrigerator.
Right.
It's like almost like, is it, it's like sort of bereft of, is it impoverished, is it, and it's left wanting. um
Mm.
um
I almost imagine it's sort of like in tidy whities, just like looking
right,
into the
yeah.
fridge, like
Mm-hmm.
like
Mm-hmm.
your dad or your uncle or
Mm-hmm.
something.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I also found it interesting. I looked up a couple of places just to see, like, where did Garden of Mirth come from, or Bower of Bliss, or, Valley of Forgiveness.
Hmm.
And just like seeing that, like, Bower of Bliss comes from Spencer's Fairy Queen. That was kind of a place that was like sort of like going in bed with the goddess, you know.
Okay.
Um, and Garden of Mirth, I have where that comes from a oh, this, dance in the this great, I learned about a great medieval poem called The Romance of the Rose, which was a 13th century French poem in which
Mm,
it's one of those like allegorical dream vision, kind of, sort of like Pilgrim's Progress is.
okay.
And and it's one of those in which all of the all the symbols are characters, and are representative of, certain ideals. And
Okay.
so which I just found, again, um I love how Billy Collins, like, says how these things have gone to die, and yet he's bringing them back in a way. You
Mm,
know what I mean?
even right.
He
Right.
has knowledge of them. And Valley of Forgiveness, I couldn't find anything like specific on that, but it
Mm,
kind of brings up some. I found some Christian books that were written, after this poem was published. So, but Forest of Despair, think of the chainsaws are howling. This sort of, it being lined with condominiums goes back to our point about, postmodernism, right? And you
right.
could even, people are even making this critique today about how everything is, strip malls. And, I hear Tim Dillon, go on, rants about this. There's Instagram pages and stuff like that that are dedicated to, the death of public beauty.
Hmm.
And that's kind of what he's, talking about too, it's only the chainsaws that are howling in the forest of despair. No one's crying, you know.
Right. And it's almost like the forest of despair is being cut down.
Yes. Yeah.
Whereas at one point, maybe like the forest of despair was like, ooh, this place of, reverence on the outskirts where one may go to become a hero and,
Mhm, mhm.
mythologically. But,
Yeah. Yeah.
now we're cutting it down, making way for condominiums, making way
Mhm,
for the
mhm,
the modern world.
mhm,
You
mhm.
know, there's a sort of there's this a postmodern saying. It has something to do with like I can't remember who said it or in what context, but it's something like there'll be parking lots on Mars or something, right?
Yeah,
Like there'll be
yeah.
there'll be there'll be strip
I
malls on
see.
Mars
Yes,
or
yes,
something to that
yes.
effect.
Mhm,
I
mhm.
can't remember exactly, but that's kind of goes along with this. What Collins is saying here, like the old places and the old things that meant so much are kind of they're because we have no narrative, they're almost being reduced to condominiums, which is just sort of mindless consumerism.
Well, yeah.
Condominiums, they condominiums are often used as a stand-in for the condo is used as a stand-in for mindless capitalism because you
Right,
can't
right,
raise a family in it and it costs so much money.
right.
It's
And
just like a
yeah,
vanity thing.
right. And you don't it's not, we're not making room for homes.
Right.
Like you can buy a condo, but I mean, it's not like real property. It's a little bit different, it's
Right.
still like temporary.
it,
Um,
it it is the property of a consumer.
mhm,
A
mhm.
person in a condo, they're not building, like, if you have a
Right.
house, you may build a family,
Mhm.
build up wealth in a
Yeah, you
house.
have property, right.
Right. The condo is just spending, spending, spending.
Mhm.
And you can't
Which
even bring any children. There's no, a lot of them, they're not very child friendly. They're not very family friendly. You're not having grandma and grandpa and everybody come over, to the condo. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah. It also makes me think that that force to despair is like being cut down. Maybe there there's no garden of mirth, no bower of bliss. There's no valley of forgiveness, no forest of despair. It's kind of like this sort of, I don't want to say whitewashing, but kind of, um, we don't have the highs and lows anymore. There's no place for
Mm,
sadness. There's no
right.
place for, you know, happiness either. We're kind of coming into this middle,
Mm.
sort of a middling. Um, but
And
yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say that makes sense because you know, earlier we're talking about these robed, statuesque
Hmm.
figures,
Hmm.
these
Right.
allegories, but
Yeah.
they've been replaced with things like black binoculars and a money
Mhm.
clip, and
Right, right.
I guess there's nothing ostensibly wrong with
Mhm,
peonies and black binoculars and
mhm.
money clips, but
Right.
if you go to any sort of tropical place or any sort of place where there's like people are vacationing, you'll see how many boomers do you see with the flannel shirt and the little
Right.
binoculars and the
Mhm,
hat, and
mhm.
they're
Right.
shuffling along with the
Yep.
socks and the
Yeah.
sandals. Like
Yeah.
it's almost like a and the baby boomers, the first time they were codified in the media was in Time magazine, and they weren't referred to as baby boomers, they were referred to as the inheritors. So
Mhm,
generations before the baby boomers thought this was the generation that's going to inherit great
mhm. Right.
this great empire.
Mhm, mhm.
But as we see, as time goes on, the baby boomers, they were just
Mhm.
consumers, and
Yeah.
all they did was watch TV and buy
Right.
stuff.
Yeah, right. Yeah, again, well, consuming, inheriting, they just took in. And
Right.
again, this also kind of going to the thought of sort of this middling sort of leaving these in some ways does it make life a little duller because now with poetry after the death of Allegory we're really left with kind of a still life. That's what it
Mm,
reminds me of, this black binoculars, a money clip, vase of peonies. It's like when you have those still lives and it has like the fruit on the um just like on the table. It's just like
mhm.
a bowl of fruit. But then kind of moving down a little bit more, I love the wheelbarrow is kind of an allusion to so much depends upon a red wheelbarrow. you know, um,
Mm-hmm.
that kind of, going back to that sort of imagist. And I don't know about the razor blade resting in glass ashtray. For some reason, that makes me think of Bukowski, but I don't know if
Mm.
that has that could just be me, my brain.
Yeah,
But
I think back in the day they used to cut. There was something with the cigar that had to be
yeah,
cut.
yeah, you're right.
You know.
Well, yeah, it's still to this day, but you wouldn't do it with a razor
Okay.
blade. I have one of them here. You have a little,
Okay.
cigar cutters, but that's
I
probably
don't
what
know
it
too
is.
much. I just know that there is a connection between cigars and razor blades. I'm not quite
Mm,
sure
mm,
of it,
mm-hmm.
but I do
Right.
know that
Yeah.
cigars have to be cut in some
Mm-hmm.
way. Or
Yep. Yeah. Um, but yeah, and I mean, hey, it kind of ends with, and this is what people say today when you have rhyming in a poem, which this poem doesn't have any rhyming, but there's a lot of like sounds and kind of near rhymes throughout. And noticeably in these last two, especially the last stanza, that kind of ends. There's not as much like sounds, or near rhymes, internal rhymes within this last stanza. And that's because we associate those things with fairy tales, or with children's books, or
mm,
nursery rhymes. And that's kind of what he's saying when those the great ideas on horseback and long-haired virtues, they kind of gone riding off into the sunset. That final page of the storybooks, which we all know from our childhood.
right. I mean and I can just see the image of like, and they lived happily ever after, and you see the
Hmm.
cart on like a winding road going off
Yes.
into the distance.
Hmm.
But I love that into an unseen valley where everyone must be fast asleep.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah,
Just
maybe a great sleep.
right, exactly. It's like it's on into death,
Mhm.
basically.
Yep, which is the title.
Right.
Yeah,
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 yeah, exactly.
yeah, yep.
And it's like and also what I was meaning by bringing up the baby boomers who were once called the inheritors, obviously there was some sort of high ideals that people thought they would inherit.
Right.
But then we give, and but all that has given away to, we know the baby boomers, they shuffle around in Hawaiian shirts and
Mm,
cargo shorts, and
right,
it's almost like they traded in all those high ideas for
right,
sort of just things that are lowercase,
right. But let's lay
common
off, yeah,
nouns.
lay off the baby boomers, because really the problem is with the young people, okay?
Right, of course.
Um,
Of
yep.
course.
So, yeah, I mean, if you want to say anything, I'm gonna do a quick just wrap up. Just give my final thoughts on Death of Allegory, but I want to give you a space to say something if you have.
No, I just thought it was a great poem, and it's a good example of how it's that blend. It's that blend
Hmm.
of sort of high academia with sort
Hmm.
of the mundane world.
Hmm.
And yeah,
Right.
it does it perfectly.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I just want to say finally, like, and I kind of mentioned it earlier, I just love how in his poem he both sort of announces the death of these ideas, but then also introduces to you to them. So in a way, he's kind
Mm.
of maintaining the tradition a little bit while also, waving goodbye to it. And maybe in a way, um, I don't know, maybe someday we will have space for them to come back. Who knows?
I think they will come back, but I personally don't think we'll love it when it comes back. I think it will be in the
Perhaps.
form of war, if you ask me.
Maybe. Yeah, but hey, that's those are two poems by Billy Collins, An Introduction to Poetry and The Death of Allegory. And, they are both earlier poems from 1988 and 1991. So yeah, and in his poems that I've read that are later, he still kind of maintains that
Right.
that he's still that he's kind of still hitting some of those same notes or similar notes. But yeah, he's one of those who I've like over the last like year or so I've really enjoyed him. Always kind of knew the name for some time, never really dug into him too much. But he's one that I want to like study, after the more I read him.
He's got good poetry, and what I like about his poetry is he almost writes for people to read it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is extremely approachable.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and there's obviously poets out there that you have to read a little bit more into, like, oh, what's this? What's this mean? What's that mean? But
Mhm.
this is obviously a poet that he knows that people are going to be reading this poem,
Yeah.
and he also knows that his audience is going to have some knowledge of some certain things.
Mhm.
And those things will be in, like you obviously have to know about that baby boomer generation to really get the illusions that he's making,
I think it helps.
especially to things like Florida. Like,
Mhm.
what is it about Florida?
Right.
We
Yeah.
all know that's where the baby boomers go.
Right. Yep. He yeah, it's not highly intellectualized poetry like say T.S. Eliot,
Right.
where that would be difficult to read. But I think that's actually, some people would look at that as a weakness, his approachability. And, I know the same thing is, I saw one time someone say something like Mary Oliver's or, the older people's like Rupi Kaur. I don't know. Um, I
I don't
wouldn't
know
put him
if I'd say
quite into
that.
that boat at the same time. Um, I think there is something to be said when you do write for people to read. It's like when you make music. You want people to listen to it, to enjoy it, to dance to it, if you can't, if it's unenjoyable, if you can't move to it, I mean, what am
Mm,
I even like, why should I listen to it,
right.
um and so I feel like there's sometimes
I
that can
think
get lost in poetry.
I think there is something there, but if we go like if we when we go to my poem, I think Ruby Carr is like the poster child for this sort of
$100%.
confessionalism.
Yeah.
So
I'm and what I was referencing to is like the approachability, like how
right,
easy it
right,
is to read,
right.
and not necessarily in a negative way, but just like it's the language, he doesn't use language that you don't understand. I mean,
Right.
and if so, it's like, it's aware that, he's giving you something that's sort of, out of common usage. Yeah. But hey, man, yeah, I enjoy Billy Collins.
I
He's
did
a
as
good one.
well.
I would absolutely, anyone who's currently reading poetry, interested in poetry, wants to write poetry. I think that he is one that, if you want to know where poetry is today, I think he's a good benchmark.
I do as well. I do as well. And I think he has and I hate to beleaguer you guys with terms, but I think he has that meta modern sensibility to kind of bridge that postmodern critique with the modern high
Mhm.
ideals, with the idealism of modernism and the
Yeah.
critique of postmodernism. So,
hmm hmm Yeah, and also his tone is important. If I can just
mm,
throw that in there too, his tone is important because that is what keeps him from being cynical or because there's always like a little bit of a touch of humor,
right.
which I enjoy even with musicians and other artists like I when they can be a little funny. Um, I think that's a great yeah, great mark. So,
I wonder if that has something to do with his time as an educator. Because I mean, if someone is an educator,
mhm.
I think it would behoove them to have an optimistic sort of point of view.
Yeah, I think so. I think of course, you could see like the jaded maybe teacher or professor at the same time, but
You get
yeah,
right.
perhaps you have to believe that or you also, if you want to get people excited or interested in what you're trying to teach them, you're trying to impart your passion for something,
Mm,
then you're going to get a lot more flies with honey than with vinegar, right?
right.
Yeah. Well, hey, you have any final concluding thoughts you want to throw in there about Mr.
No
Collins?
concluding thoughts. Postmodern without a critique. So
Hmm.
what we really have is we're able to sort of transcend who the author is and appreciate poetry for what it is. And
Yeah.
that's kind of the vibe I think that can carry us through the rest of the 21st century.
100%. And so next week we're going to be taking a little bit different look. Another one who's around Billy Collins' um, age, I guess, or contemporary, but who's no longer with us, Charles Bukowski.
Mm.
So, which is going to be exciting, but certainly a different tone than what we've been discussing today.
Definitely a different tone. Definitely someone who will critique the culture. Definitely
Hmm.
someone who's a bit more cynical.
Absolutely, yeah, and I can't wait.
Yeah, still a great writer. Bukowski's one of
Right?
my faves.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, man.
But
Well, hey.
I
Oh
was gonna
nope. Go
say
ahead. But yep.
Bukowski's one of my faves. But his poetry is it's also it's worthwhile. He's now
Yeah.
Bukowski's known
100%.
as a short story kind of guy, but
Right, right, yeah. But yeah, his I love his poetry. Yeah, even though
yeah, yeah, yeah.
his prose is probably people know him more for his prose,
Right.
um but yeah, hey, thanks for listening. Thanks for sticking with us here, season 2, episode 1, wrapping up here. And hey, like, subscribe, share it, give it to your, share it with a loved one. Maybe sit around the fireside and just give
Right.
put us on, invite
Or
us
even
in.
right. Well, my name's James.
And I'm Justin.
And this has been Verse Take. See you guys later.